Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'm showing you how to make strawberry brownies. Hey Sugar Spun bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. Today we are making strawberry brownies, or I kind of want to call them chocolate-covered strawberry brownies. We have a fudgy brownie base, a vibrantly strawberry flavored frosting topping, and we're topping that off with a silky ganache coating. Let's go ahead and get started by preheating our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now for our fudgy brownie base, we are going to be using my easy from scratch brownie recipe. We're going to start with a large mixing bowl, and we're going to combine 12 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And I like to cut this into pieces because we're going to be melting it, and I want to just speed up that process a bit. And we'll add 1/2 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips. We'll take this over to the microwave where we're going to heat it for 30 seconds, and then we'll give everything a nice stir. It'll seem like not much has happened, but you do want to stir this regularly. We're gonna pop it in the microwave again in 15-second intervals, stirring in between until the chocolate and butter have completely melted, and when you mix everything together, it's nice and silky smooth. This is looking pretty great, so while this mixture is still nice and warm, I wanna go ahead and add my cocoa powder. We're using 1/2 cup of natural unsweetened cocoa powder. And I like to add it while the butter and chocolate are still warm because it helps bloom the cocoa a little bit, which helps develop the flavor and give us a real rich chocolate flavor. We'll go ahead and stir that in until it's thoroughly combined. And then we'll go ahead and add our sugar. For today's recipe, we're using 3/4 cup of granulated sugar and 3/4 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. We'll stir these in until they're well combined. Now for today's recipe, we are going to be using 2 large eggs, and ideally these should be room temperature. We are also going to be adding 1 additional egg yolk, which helps make these brownies extra moist and tender and fudgy. We'll also add a teaspoon of vanilla extract and a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. Go ahead and whisk these ingredients together until they're well combined. Finally, we'll add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, and we want to make sure this is completely combined. Now for good measure, just for an extra chocolate factor, I also like to add 3/4 cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips here as well. That's optional. All right, now we're going to be baking today's recipe in a 9x9 square pan. You can see I've lined this pan with parchment paper. It's going to just make it easy to remove the brownies and cut them after they've finished baking and after I've assembled them. Now we'll go ahead and spread our brownie batter into the prepared pan. It is pretty thick. It's a thick batter, that's normal. You just want to spread it in an even layer. All right, now we'll take this over to our preheated oven where it's going to need to bake for about 30 to 35 minutes. A good way to tell that the brownies are finished baking is a toothpick inserted in the center should come out clean, or preferably with a few moist fudgy crumbs. So these brownies are looking pretty perfect at this point, so we're gonna set them aside and let them cool completely before we go any further. You don't wanna add your strawberry layer until they're completely cooled, or you're going to have a runny mess on your hands. All right, so while our brownies are cooling, we can go ahead and start preparing our strawberry frosting. Now for today's recipe, you're going to need 1 cup of freeze-dried strawberries. These are going to give that strawberry layer the most vibrant flavor possible. Just trust me on this. Now we're going to want to pulverize these, and I like to use this handy small food processor that I have here. This is a multi-tool. I use it for a lot of different things. I can go ahead and link to this in the recipe description if you'd like. But we'll just add our berries. We're just gonna pulse this and pulverize them until they are ground to a fine dust. So you take a look at that. You don't want there to be any lumps in there. So we'll set that aside for now. Now in a large mixing bowl, we are going to combine another 12 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter with some powdered sugar. Now we're using a total of 2 cups of powdered sugar for today's recipe. I'm just going to go ahead and add a bit of that to the butter. We're also just gonna add an 1/8 teaspoon of table salt. Now you're going to want to grab your electric mixer, and we'll cream together the butter, sugar, and salt until everything's creamy and well combined. It may take a minute, it may seem a little dry at first, just keep mixing. Now we'll gradually add the remaining powdered sugar until that is completely combined. Next, we'll grab that strawberry dust and we'll add that to the bowl, and we are going to mix that in as well. All right, finally for today's recipe, you're going to need 2 to 4 tablespoons of heavy cream. I always start with just 2 tablespoons, and I'm gonna add that, and then I'm gonna stir this in. Now the point of the cream is to make a nice spreadable topping. You don't want it to be too stiff, or it's gonna make a mess of your brownies when you go to spread it over the surface. All right, and now take a look at this. I'm pretty happy with this consistency. Now, again, you do not want to add this to the brownies until they've cooled completely. Once your brownies have cooled completely, we can go ahead, and I just like to kind of spoon it over the surface and then gently nudge it all over the brownies. You want to have a nice even layer. All right, our final step here is to make our simple chocolate ganache. I like to use a quality baking bar for today's recipe. You'll need 4 ounces, which is perfect because most baking bars are 4 ounces, and you're just going to want to finely chop this. Take a look at these pieces. You can see they're nice and fine. This is going to make sure your ganache melts nicely and evenly in the microwave. Now we're also going to add a 1/2 cup of heavy cream, and now I'm going to take this over to the microwave and I'm going to heat it for 45 seconds. After 45 seconds, we're going to gently whisk it starting from the center. It might seem like it wants to separate at first. And everything should end up nice and smooth and silky and completely combined once you're finished whisking. If you still have some discernible chocolate pieces left, you may not have chopped your chocolate fine enough, just go ahead and pop that back in the microwave in 8-second intervals, whisking again in between. All right, now let's go ahead and pour this over our frosting. I'm just gonna spread this so it's a nice even layer. Look how pretty that ganache is. I love ganache. I love making ganache. And now ideally you would wait for the ganache to set completely before enjoying. This will happen at room temperature, it just takes longer, or you can pop it in the fridge. It'll start to harden in about 30 minutes or so if you put it in the fridge. These brownies are just as good cold as at room temperature, so it's really whichever you prefer. Now my ganache hasn't completely set yet, but we're gonna go ahead and dig in anyway. Now, don't forget, we lined our pan with parchment paper so we can easily lift the brownies out of the pan and onto our cutting board to make it nice and easy for cutting. Now, good tip, anytime you're cutting into something kind of messy like this, is just to wipe off the blade of your knife between cuts. It's just gonna make your cuts a little bit neater. And that is how you make these strawberry brownies. Really hope you guys enjoyed today's recipe, and if you try this one out, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. You've got to try these.